Hello and
Hello.
good evening. Welcome to your Tuesday night, or if you're here in the UK, Wednesday morning installment of SPTV Live from London and Canada, Vancouver, with my guest here, Jeff. How are you doing?
I am very well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for coming on and joining me again. I'm so excited that you're back from your travels and we launched your chat. How many subscribers have you got now?
Just shy of 900. So
Oh,
it slowed
exciting.
down a little bit because I was away for about 9 days, but almost
Amazing.
at 1,000.
So, for those of you who don't know, Jeff was a Scientologist staff member, joined the Sea Org, and has a really fascinating story. And I introduced him to SPTV. Was it a week or 2 weeks ago? I think.
Probably about 3 now.
3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and we did a really fascinating interview where he told his story and what it was like growing up in Scientology in Canada, and he started his own channel. So go and show him some love. I've just put a message in the live chat here. Give him a sub. Let's get you to 1,000 subscribers, and then we can help
Yeah.
get you monetized. Where are you at with your watch hours?
Not enough. I definitely need to get some more people watching. So if anyone's here that wants to watch on my channel, it's very easy just to open up another tab and you can listen to them both.
Absolutely. In fact, you know what? If you go and watch this interview live on his channel, it's the same thing. We're streaming it to both channels, and give him the watch hours he needs, and we can get Jeff into the monetized zone. There's some great comments coming in here. Poor mum, two gingers. There are so many comments about that have come through in the 3 videos we've done together.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is one of our standout features, I'd say.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It must be a thing. We just get on well. We're always going to. It's
Of course. And my
yeah.
wife is a ginger. For anyone who watched we had a Friday night live, I guess not last Friday, but the Friday before, and she is also a ginger. So thank you, dawned on me.
There we go. Although one thing I must say is your beard is far darker than my beard is much more ginger than my hair, whereas
Me
your beard
too.
is much darker.
Yeah, my hair is darker. The hair that's left on my head so far tends to get much blonder in the summer, and then in the
Oh
winter it'll
yeah,
be darker. So
me too.
yeah, I
But
have a
you have
bad
much
habit
more
of
hair.
not wearing a hat, and so tend to bleach my hair.
I mean, I was told when I was younger, don't wear hats so much because it rubs your hair down and you'll lose your hair quicker. So I stopped wearing hats, and here I am going very, very bald very, very quickly.
Yeah, it does happen. It is one of those things. But see, now I want to wear a hat more often because, thinning. So,
Well, where's your sailor hat? You had one on the back of your chair last time we spoke.
oh yeah,
Should we do crazy hat stream? If you wear that, I'll wear my hat. I'll get a
really?
special one.
Okay.
Okay, hold on.
I'll have to size it appropriately.
Okay. Well,
Andrea's gonna make a lot of fun of me about this.
so this is a hat. I went to Atlanta last year, and my big treat to myself was a custom fit cowboy hat.
Oh,
Yeehaw.
nice, beauty.
So this is my cowboy hat, which I spent a lot of money on and never wear because you can't get away with this in the UK.
No, and where I was, as you know, Alberta, which is the next province over, you could totally get away with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a
I
lot
mean,
of my family is our farm people, and they do tend to rock hats like that. So
I think the appropriate term for farm people is cowboys, right?
I wouldn't say they're cowboys, but they're
Yeah.
yeah, not like you are. The London cowboy.
I know. If I wore this down the road on the street, I would get so many looks and comments.
Well, yeah, exactly. So,
But
um, yeah,
go on.
that's
Oh,
my cowboy hat. That's my sailor hat. Now, this makes me as much of a captain as David Miscavige is just by wearing this. So, that's the only reason that we got it was just to make fun of him. So,
well, I think for those of you watching, firstly, if you've just joined us, welcome. Go and watch this from Jeff's channel, PTS for Life, and give him the watch hours he needs. Do you want to introduce yourself to the? I know we did an interview together. If you haven't watched it already, go and watch it. But for those of you who maybe don't know who you are, do you want to give us a little bit of a recap of your story, who you are, why you're here, and all that.
Totally. So my name is Jeff. I am from Canada. I actually was born in Toronto, which is on the East Coast, but I was born there, but raised in Vancouver. Both of my parents were Scientologists. In fact, they were in the Guardian's office at one point back in the 70s. They met in Scientology. They moved me out here along with my family. They raised me and sent me to a Scientology school where I was indoctrinated into the technology of study by L. Ron Hubbard, and essentially did a few courses when I was younger. When I was 14, I was recruited into the Sea Org, where I was kidnapped and trafficked. And the story behind that, as you have just posted in there, can be seen in your video. But the long and short of it is my mother had the parental rights for me, and she was not for me going down there. However, she didn't know that I had gone down there. And while I was down there, she pulled me back up when she found out, and made me essentially convince her that this is what I wanted to do and not what I was being told I wanted to do, which was not true. I was well drilled and versed in how to speak to her to convince her to let me go back down. Ultimately, I ended up disconnecting from my mother due to, according to them, me going PTS to her.
PTS meaning potential trouble source connected to an SP, an enemy of the church, right?
Yeah. And so anyone who's connected with an SP, essentially, if someone ever gets sick or injured or anything of that sort, makes even mistakes in life, they are connected to a suppressive person and are PTS.
And when you're PTS, you get a declare like this one here that says you are a potential trouble source.
And that's especially if you're a specific type and are unable to, quote unquote, handle it with Scientology. I didn't receive one of those until much later, although I don't have mine like you do. So, but ultimately ended up disconnecting from my mom, and that actually destroyed our family, separated it for my entire teenage life, as well as most of my 20s. I think I got back in touch with my mom in my 30s. So 41 now. Spent some time on the Class 5 org staff, probably about 8 to 10 years of my life, as well as a couple stints down in the Sea Org on the EPF, which is essentially the boot camp for the Sea Org to see if you can cut it, essentially. Their slogan is "Many are called, few are chosen." So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think it's such a fascinating story. And in the interview we did, we talked about we told your story in a nutshell, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much there to come out and to talk about how Scientology really works. And I'm so excited to have your channel and to hear all of those stories come out, because I think there's lots of stuff out there about Scientology in the Sea Organization in LA and in Clearwater in Florida, and there's not enough about how Scientology operates at the city level. So Vancouver, Toronto, London, New York, any city in the world you can possibly name probably has a Church of Scientology, and there are staff members that work there and have dedicated a certain amount of time and a part of their life to work for the church. And a lot of these abuses and things that we hear going on in the church that are really bad and horrible, they happen at every level of the Church of Scientology in every city you can think of. And that's what I'm trying to do, is allow people to tell their stories of like how it affected them around the world. And that's what I'm excited to hear from your channel, to hear your stories. And
Yeah, I agree. I think that the general public of Scientology are more involved in Class 5 organizations, and what the Sea Org stuff is very high profile, and it's covered extensively. And I think that's important stories to get out as well. But the fact is, all this stuff, the abuse and the words I can't say, different types of abuse are definitely happening locally, and people's lives are ruined by insistent, all the words like that, all the fundraising that is being forced on the local parishioners and causing people to go deeply into debt, extend credit limits, all for buildings that the ideal org buildings that they're trying to fundraise for. They never come, or when they do come, they're a waste of money, and just doesn't actually expand Scientology like they say it's gonna. So people's lives are ruined because of that.
Yeah. I interviewed someone the other day, and I'm currently going through and editing it before it's ready to go live. But this person was a public Scientologist, paying parishioner here in the UK, and he tells the story of how he ended up in over £100,000 of debt because he was asked to pay for this course and then do this and do this, and oh, you don't have any money, that's fine, we can set you up with a loan, you can borrow this money from this staff member, or you can go to this bank. They had a really good connection with the local bank that would be willing to provide loans to pay for courses, and this guy, his life was financially ruined because of Scientology. And he would go in and he would say, look, I don't have any money to pay for whatever you're going to ask me to pay for. And they would be like, okay, that's fine, well, let's find a solution to that, because the answer no is not an answer that you can give in Scientology. It's always a solution. And this is one thing I want to do, is tell this story of how Scientology impacts people, yes, in the short term, but also long term. Right. I left Scientology. I was kicked out in 2014. I was still doing courses and probably still a Scientologist, considering myself as a practicing Scientologist, until 2016, 2017, something like that. Then kind of drifted away. And it wasn't until last year that I realized it was still impacting me and the way that I think and the way that I process information. Even though I didn't think I was applying Scientology, I was still doing stuff in the way that has trained me to do or think or behave. And that's what I want to get across, is you might have a Scientology experience and have some great bits and some bad bits and come away from it, but actually the damage is much more longer term and much deeper than a lot of people, I think, realize.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the financial setbacks and abuse and trauma set aside, the amount over the past 10 years that I've had to reevaluate what I think of things, and not just the obvious like psychiatry or psychology, but if I have a bad day, if I'm sad, if I trip, any kind of reaction I have in life, because I was born into it and it's all I knew, I had to relearn by assimilating what other people will do, and to find out who I really am and how I actually react to things versus how I was taught to react to things. That's probably been the biggest difficulty in the recovery process, is realizing that I'm wrong or
That's
not
such a
doing
big
things correctly and somehow.
Yeah, that's such a big point as well, of like finding out who you are, because in Scientology, when you join, the belief is that Scientology is the only way to clear the planet, to go about your life, to do this and to do that. Like, there is no other way, and if you do this, it will work 100% of the time. And so your mission, your life, your purpose very much becomes Scientology. And so when you leave Scientology and you come to realize that no, maybe your purpose isn't Scientology. It might be, to be an artist or a creative, or it might be to raise a family or whatever. Like, those big questions of who you are and why you're here and what you're doing with your life all get blown out of the water. And that's a huge thing for me in the last year of recovery, of trying to figure out, and I still don't know the answer, but like, I went into Scientology wanting to know more about who I am and why I'm here, and I felt like that was the answer. And now it's like, well, hold on, I don't know what is, who am I don't know. And that's such a big journey to go on.
Yeah, 100%. Like, how do you do anything in life if it's not as good as saving the planet?
Yeah.
Like, it truly is, it's hammered into you. That's the biggest purpose. And even when going back to the fundraising and the regging, which is where people try and squeeze money out of you for courses and auditing or anything that Scientology is trying to do, if you say, oh, well, I want that money for a car, or I want the money for some education, for my kids, or even for myself, they say, well, what's the greatest purpose? What's the greatest good? What's the best you can do with that money? And it's this ultimate guilt trip that they just pull out like it's the ace card, you know.
Yeah.
And it does work. And embarrassingly, I've used that in regging money from people, and selling people books, and even getting them back online, because I used to do a lot of outreach to people who were kind of sitting on the periphery, still Scientologists, but not like active. And you just constantly have to hammer this into them. It's just guilt, right? And it's false purpose, to use
Yeah.
Scientology lingo, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I think that's the thing. So for those of you watching, Jeff and I both worked in the sales department of Scientology. My job was director of public book sales, so I was in charge of all of the sales of books to non-Scientologists, and Jeff was your bookstore officer, right? BSO, selling books to not just raw public, but also people who are current Scientologists, and get them to buy more books. And in that sales role, it's really interesting because you learn actually really quite effective sales tools, right? Like I've got letters of commendations from people high up in Scientology saying you've got sales of books up to the highest level it's ever been, and well done, and blah blah blah, because I was really good at it. I could sell anyone a book. If someone walked into the church skeptical and saying you're a cult and you believe in Xenu and all of this blah blah blah, for me that was a challenge. I was like, okay, well, let me prove to you how, not how wrong you are, but how misinformed you are, and how actually let's get you the real information so you can find out for yourself. And I was really good at that. But actually, if you look back on it, it's horrible, because what you do is find someone's ruin, right? Which is the thing that's ruining someone's life. What's the thing you most want to change or improve about yourself? Which all sounds very lovely, but you get to the point where if the person in front of you is crying, we had a saying, crying is buying. Because if I've got you to cry, that means I found what's really bugging you in your life. And therefore, it's really easy to sell the book as a solution to that problem. Now, it was with best intentions when I was in Scientology, because I thought I was helping that person. But ultimately, that's a horrible thing to do to someone, is to get them to cry. Imagine you were to go to, like, buy a new car, and the car salesman went on this big journey with you and got you to cry, and then you bought the car. Like, yes, that person got the sale of the car, but what a horrible thing to do to a person. And that's the thing about Scientology, is you think you're doing the best thing for humanity, but actually you're harming that person without even realizing it.
Yeah, and it really comes down to an invading privacy, which is one of the bigger things that I've had to get over, and knowing that it's not okay if someone doesn't want to talk about something, just to back off. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a bad skill to have if you need information, but it does get abused and kind of out of hand, and that's one thing that I've had to stop doing.
Yeah.
a little bit anyway. But if I ever need that information, I can definitely get it by just pushing and pushing, and eventually people just say, okay, fine, I'll tell you, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's something that people aren't used to.
But that's the thing in Scientology. That's a great thing. It's like, okay, fine, just stop hassling me. I'll give you your money or whatever it is you want. And you as a Scientologist think, fantastic, I've got my stat, I've helped that person, great. But actually it's like, no, you've guilt tripped the person into it. You've hassled them so much that they just go, I'll give you what you want just to shut you up. And that's not a nice tactic to have, right?
No, it's really the one thing that I feel most guilty about being in Scientology. I pulled a lot of money out of a lot of people, and it's always with the best intention. But now, knowing what I know, it wasn't good. And then also, second to that would be recovering certain people who I really like, and now, if I were to reach out to them, they wouldn't talk to me because I'm, persona non grata. So
yeah. I think Gabe said this really, really well. So for those of you watching, Gabrielle Toth, her YouTube channel is Escaping the Cultiverse. I don't have the link ready, but Goldie, if you're still watching, if you could stick a link in the chat, that'd be fantastic. She's a former executive director of Vancouver org, where Jeff used to work, and then she worked in HCO, which is the communications like HR division. I did an interview with her, and she started her own channel and so on. And one of the things that she said was that, and it stuck with me, I helped a lot of people get into Scientology. Now I want to help some people get out.
Yeah.
And for me, that's struck such a chord of like, that's the same as me. Like, there are people who are currently in Scientology who wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for me. And yes, there's an element of guilt, but it's more just the right thing to do. Is now I'm in a place where I have a platform, I can talk about these things and share these experiences. And if I can help just one person, then that makes it worth it. And I feel like I have like a moral obligation to tell my story and give other people a platform to do the same.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely on that note, Gabe and I are having a live tomorrow at
Yes,
4:00 Pacific time, or LA time, or whatever you want to call it. We're going to be discussing disconnection because her and I are both very affected by it, and it has shaped our lives. So check us out tomorrow, and we're hoping if you're around that you might be able to join us.
I'll be there.
Okay,
I'll
good.
be there. I was
I'll have to
texting
change
Gabe
the
before we went
thumbnail.
live. Yeah, no, it would be great. Before we go any further, I wanted to start the stream with this clip. However, I realized there was a swear word in it and I didn't want to get censored. So I've waited, and I feel like enough time has passed now, which is a complete tangent from what we have just been talking about. But today I met up with somebody who I've known for quite a while and have been working with for a while, under the radar, and haven't said anything publicly about it. And today I'm breaking the silence. And for those of you watching, John Sweeney is a BBC journalist who did the Panorama documentary Scientology and Me back in 2007, 2008. Fascinating documentary. If you haven't watched it, go and see it. But he is one of the biggest, baddest SP, suppressive people, enemies of the church here in the UK. And the reason we recorded this video is because I wanted to kind of send a message to Scientology that me and him know each other, and me and him are working on something, and this is going to send shivers down their spines. So this is a message that John Sweeney and I recorded for the Church of Scientology today. It's short and sweet, but if you're watching, OSA, this message is for you.
Alex and I have a simple message to the Church of Scientology that goes like this: Church of Scientology, do fuck off.
Do fuck off. Beauty.
So yeah, that was that. They would they'd be terrified if they knew I was hanging out with him.
Well, I'm gonna have to make a trip over there too. So,
dude, you'd be welcome anytime. Have you been over here before?
No.
Oh, mate.
We do have friends in Ireland though, so we do want to make it over there at some point. And I actually have friends somewhere in England area for sure, Britain for sure. But
oh, amazing.
Yeah,
well, yeah, I want to get like a convention together. I'd love to do like an SPTV fest thing. We were talking about doing something in October, me and Pearl on the Go, and I think it all kind of got pushed to the side because we're busy with other stuff. But I'd love to organize a get together where we all get together in one room and people come meet us and talk to us and ask questions, and we'll try and make it happen.
Sounds good.
But
we'll definitely try to be there.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with recovery? When did you leave the church, and what's that process been like from then to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So I left, I want to say it was 11 years ago when I actually fully was gone. And the recovery process has really been started out with YouTube videos, watching predominantly Chris Shelton, MSC now. He has, such an amazing channel that when he was leaving, he covered like pretty much every aspect in a very critical thinking kind of way. Is that's kind of his shtick, right?
Hi, Laura, by the way. Laura's great.
Hey, Laura. I think Laura is Canadian as well, in Toronto.
No, Laura's in LA.
Is she in LA? But
Yeah.
she's mentioned stuff about Toronto org. So
I don't know. Laura, put in the chat.
yeah,
Toronto.
let us know.
I don't know. Laura's awesome.
Yes, I was watching the stream earlier. Where was I? Okay, so yes, watching a lot of Chris Shelton stuff, and it basically just breaks down in real simple terms what it is and what's actually happening, and so that really helped me. The next step would be letting my wife know that I had been involved in it, and then that opened that dialogue in order to discuss, how I'm feeling and what's going on with me. And then she started watching the SPTV stuff. Wasn't known as SPTV at the time, but it just kind of gave the opportunity to look at what I was thinking and then evaluate it essentially. And it's just, again, one thing at a time, like an onion. And it got deeper and deeper, and to the point where I'm doing this, where I just know that it needs to be stopped, essentially.
Yeah.
So
I love how I love the story arc with you, because you as a child were working for the church and brought up your father working for CCHR, which is one of the church's front groups, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, talking about psychiatric abuse and so on. And you were like a poster child, protesting against psychiatry, doing the church's good work. And now you've come through this amazing arc of now you're speaking out about the church in a similar kind of way. And I love that's the journey you've been on.
Well, I was put in newspapers with giant stuffed Ritalin pills, Ritalin or Prozac, I forget which one, doesn't matter as far as Scientology is concerned, but there was this old lady who was dressed up like a psychiatrist with an evil look on her face, and me as a child with this, massive overstuffed pill, and put in the newspaper. I didn't have a choice in that. That was just what I was put through, in the indoctrination and anti-psychiatry protests. And my dad used to keep pig brains in the freezer so he could hook it up to this mock-up shock machine and protest with it, and that got in the newspaper too. I actually found that clipping.
Did you?
Yeah, I'll pull it up. Actually, my wife found it, but yeah, like everything, all the old papers are digitized now and have access through the public library, so it's just a matter of searching through it.
Wow.
But
And you were
do.
All of this stuff happens under the Department of Special Affairs, right? Which people know about the dirty tricks and the harassment and the private investigators and so on. But also a part of the Department of Special Affairs is this PR image stuff of like, hey, we're not a cult. Look, we're, trying to expose abuses of human rights and psychiatry and so on. Like, it's all a PR thing. And you were exposed quite early to a lot of these OSA operations, right? Didn't you say you were kind of sent on these psych busting missions before as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, my dad never remarried, and so he was, as someone who's taking care of a kid, where else was I going to go? He had his mission, which was to be on the anti-psych team, and he was running it. And so I would just be brought along to all these, any kind of, like, they have this traveling anti-psych museum. I'd be brought along to those. I've had run-ins with Jerry Armstrong as a child, where I was told to get a gun and shoot him because he was handing out leaflets. Like, that's all he was doing, but the insanity that is Scientology is he was the worst person ever. And for anyone who doesn't know who Jerry Armstrong is, he was on the ship, I believe, with LRH, and he was supposed to be the biographer of some sort. And so he was intimately connected, but then left, and in Vancouver is where he lives, and he would protest the church quite often. Like, he was public enemy number one. My dad used to spy on him at his home. He used to bring me with him to, like, just sit outside his house and watch what he's doing, and actually, someone who, I don't know if he's still in contact with my dad right now, but he is an operative for DSA here. His name is Phil, and he at one point befriended Jerry Armstrong as a neighbor and tricked him into thinking he was someone else. And there's a whole write-up on the Jerry Armstrong's blog about it, and I know the guy, and he wasn't allowed to come into events or have any connection with the church because he was a double agent. So
Wow.
all that stuff I was involved in.
And that's, excuse me, I think it's just mad when you think, the church, rightfully can have a belief or a way of treating people who are former members or whatever. If you have a church that's a Christian church and people are protesting outside, you're well within your right to say, okay, you're creating a nuisance, we don't want you in the building. Fair enough. But the Church of Scientology take it one step further, and they don't just want to prevent your access and say, look, no, and shut you down. They will go to great lengths to try and destroy, as per policy, the word is destroy, critics, former members, people who are speaking out about the church from a critical viewpoint. They will do anything and everything they can to try and destroy you. For example, Leah Remini, with her case in Los Angeles at the moment, is claiming harassment from the church. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Twitter accounts tweeting about her every single day, slurring her and saying she's this and she's that and so on. And it's like, guys, if you spend all of that money and time on actually helping people rather than trying to slag off former members, maybe you could actually do some good in the world, right? My website that I launched at the beginning of August, called Scientology Business, is a blog all about, the money, the financial, legal operations of Scientology in the UK, Europe, and the Commonwealth. And since launching, it's had something like 5,000 or 10,000 attempts to hack into the back end of the system to try and gain control of the website. Luckily, it's okay. I've got protections in place, but it's like, why are you spending all this effort to try and discredit and intimidate former members? Would it not be much better to just say publicly, yeah, he's a former member, he's had this experience and whatever, I'm not going to listen to him, and then redirect your efforts into helping people?
Just don't say anything.
Yeah.
Like, I could go outside and hang outside a Catholic church, and I could hand out flyers that say bad things about the Pope or something, and no one's going to come and follow me home and go through my trash and make a website about me. It just won't happen. So it's just further proof that it's not a religion. It's just it's a business that's just trying to make money, and they just destroy lives.
Do you want to talk a little bit about more on your experience in the Office of Special Affairs with your father going and following Jerry Armstrong, for example? Like, what other sort of things were you tasked to do or were helping with your father doing this sort of thing?
I don't have a ton of memories from that time, specifically with that. The ones that do stand out are essentially following enemies of the church, and a lot of anti-psych stuff, like protesting outside of conferences when the psychiatrists are in town, like literally marching down the street with massive banners and so forth. Protesting outside Riverview is one hospital that is no longer, I don't think, is open, but they were a huge psychiatric hospital. I think some criminally insane, but it's in a city nearby, and we would protest outside that, predominantly for electric shock and so forth. But I would say the biggest effect, if we're talking about recovery, that has had on me is the inability to go see someone when I needed help, right? Like, throughout my entire childhood, my teens, I even let Scientology know that I was having thoughts of self-harm. And only thing that they said to me, the DSA, the person who's in charge of the spy wing locally, who was an OT something, I think she was on OT 7 at that point. She told me I would just come back worse off if I completed the task of ending my life. And that's what they said to a 14-year-old. So that's kind of been the biggest effect, is not being able to reach out to actual help throughout those formative years for myself. So I have since, though.
Scientology is like, their view of life in general places it as quite insignificant, and I'm, to be honest, quite surprised that Scientology hasn't gone down the Waco route, because in Scientology the belief is you are an immortal spiritual being that will have many lives, you've had many before, you've lived for millions of years, and you at some point will drop your body, and then you'll go and pick up another body. So the idea of life is quite unimportant in Scientology. So I'm quite surprised that they haven't had some sort of Waco incident. But they do things like this, where you're saying you're going through this trauma and you've got these feelings and these thoughts. They kind of go, okay, well, that's not important. It doesn't matter, because regardless of what happens, well, you'll just pick up another body and carry on as a spiritual being. So who cares? And that's like so demeaning of your experience and your feelings and your emotions. It's like, that's the last thing you want to hear as someone going through those things. You want someone to go, I'm really sorry to hear that, talk to me about it. How are you feeling? Why are you feeling? But no, feelings and emotions are not a thing in Scientology, because they're so unimportant. What's important is getting, the mission of clearing the planet. And it's like, great, I get the enthusiasm. I love that you're all united trying to do the same thing. Fantastic. But you're doing that at the cost of someone's mental health.
Yeah, totally. Like on that note for Waco, I showed you this privately earlier, and I went over this in my last stream. But this thing here, this is from 1978, back when the FBI was prosecuting members of Church Scientology for Operation Snow White, where they infiltrated all kinds of offices.
Which, by the way, was the largest infiltration of the US government in history.
Yeah. And they infiltrated Canadian governments as well. Yeah. Obviously, we're just the top hat of America, so no one really cares about us. But basically, when you're talking about Waco, if you talk to a Scientologist about Waco, they think that it's persecution against a religion, and it actually what the FBI did was wrong. So that's the level of mistrust and hatred that the Scientology has towards the FBI or any kind of government institution. And there's 3 of these booklets. They're all just propaganda put out literally by the Church Scientology to discredit and try and make the general public not trust FBI. Which fair, they're not innocent, but in the case of Waco and Scientology, they're completely on the money. They're right.
I think this links into the whole Danny Masterson thing as well, because I've heard a lot of people on SPTV talk about Danny Masterson and how he's still a Scientologist in good standing, and questioning, why have Scientology not distanced themselves from Danny Masterson? Why, because I work in marketing, I work in PR, I understand the way these things work. And my professional advice to the church would be, wash your hands of the guy and say he's a convicted serial, can't say the word on YouTube, but we all know what he did. This guy did wrong, and maybe we could have handled it better, we could have done better, but we didn't. But ultimately, he doesn't represent who we are or what we do or anything, so goodbye. And that would be a much better PR image than the PR image that they currently do have, which is the message of, this trial is a attack on religious freedom and blah, blah, blah. And someone asked a question on another stream of like, why have they done that? Why haven't they just washed their hands? And I genuinely believe that this is them planting the seed. It's a very strategic move. Scientology work, and on the longer term, they play very long games, right? You think about applying for tax exemption. In 1999, here in the UK, they applied for charity status. They were rejected. And we're here now, 24 years later, and they're still planning and preparing for the next, it's a long game. So with Danny Masterson, they haven't washed their hands of him, because actually, yes, that might damage their image publicly, but David Miscavige, the leader of the church, is being accused of a lot of things. There's a grand jury in place. There are multiple lawsuits in which he is named as a defendant. And I personally believe that this planting of the seed of Danny Masterson is preparing Scientologists for David Miscavige going to prison. Because if Dave Miscavige says, look at what happened to Danny Masterson. He was a great guy. He's a great Scientologist. He is amazing. He did this. And the system have locked him away and accused him of doing these things. look how bad the system is. They don't know what they're talking about. That plants this, by backing him up, it plants a seed. So in Scientologists' minds, they're already thinking, God, this judicial system is corrupt and it's wrong, and Scientology is the only way of handling ethics issues and being able to decide what's right and wrong. So that when David Miscavige ends up being on trial and potentially goes to prison for whatever he ends up being convicted for, the Scientologists are prepped and ready. So their go-to mindset is Dave Miscavige is absolutely fine, and the system have just done it again, being corrupt, and they don't know what they're talking about. We love Dave Miscavige, right? I personally think that's the game they're playing. That's why they're backing Danny Masterson up, because it's planting the seed for when he's on trial.
Well, and they've been doing this for decades.
Yes.
So I remember I was there, and I mean, I was very small, of course, but there was that big case in Portland. I think it was the Wallersheim case, where they lost that. But Scientologists don't know this. All they feel they know is that that Scientology was being persecuted, and they went and fought and they won, because there was huge protests happening outside the court. And I mean, that's all you could do at the time. There's no internet and so forth. But Scientologists, my dad to this day thinks that Scientology won that, when they didn't. They just didn't pay out for ever.
I spoke to someone earlier today who is a current Scientologist, right? Who is currently following everything and believing it all and so on. And I asked this person about the Danny Masterson trial. And I said, what do you think? Like, what have you heard? And this person said, well, I don't know, I've not been following it, but what I've heard through the church is Danny Masterson was accused of doing this and that. And for some reason, people think the church were involved because apparently they knew about it or something. And I stopped them right there. And I said, well, you know Scientology policy, and the policy is to write reports on everything. So firstly, the church did know about it if they applied Scientology correctly, because they would have had to write reports on it. So therefore the church is involved, surely. And this person was just like, no, absolutely, I agree with you. Fine, maybe the church knew about it, but it's just a clear example of how the system is corrupt and they don't know what they're doing, and they're trying to make Scientology look like the bad ones. That's the viewpoint of a current Scientologist about the Danny Masterson thing, is it's an attack on the church. It's not an attack on the church. It's convicting someone who's done horrible things and serving justice for the Jane Does that were involved, which is a great thing. And that's what needs to happen, is justice needs to be served. Yes, the church were involved and they should be on trial. They're not. But the church is painting the picture to their members that this whole thing is an attack on the church.
Yep.
That's what they're trying to get them to believe. And
that's the message that needs to go out more, I think, is more coverage of the church's involvement. That's the important thing. Obviously, it's terrible what he did to these people, and he is going to pay for that. But now it's time to shift that focus and put that light on Scientology's involvement, not just in that, but in the involvement in all the crimes that they're guilty of covering up. Because I am aware of many from when I was younger, including sexual assault and things with underage people that have happened. And instead of turning people in, they just kick them out, kind of thing, and say, hey, go deal with your stuff and don't come back.
And sometimes they don't even do that with Danny Masterson. They were like, well, you're a Scientologist in good standing, so carry on.
He's a big donor, and I'm going to guess that he has dirt on maybe not, David Miscavige, but other high-profile people who are currently in the church. And I would guess that there's a small amounts of blackmail happening on both ends, kind of thing. Yeah, I found it very strange, to be honest, that they were not distancing themselves, because they quite often do in these cases. I know of cases where people have been, they just say, oh yeah, they're not active anymore. Yeah, they were at some point, but they're not there anymore. But I think just of that high level, I think that there's something else going on.
I genuinely believe that it's because David Miscavige is like, oh, what a great opportunity here. A high profile lawsuit where the church isn't on trial, but it's involved. And at the same time, I'm being sued, but left, right, and center. And I'm going to have to face the time, whether I like it or not, where I'm going to have to speak in court. I think we're at that point now where David Miscavige can't run and hide anymore. The day will come where he will have to speak in court on the record. And it's only a matter of time before that happens. And I personally believe that the Danny Masterson trial was him coming to terms with that and going, right, what's the best way of mitigating the damage? Well, here's a perfect opportunity because the church wasn't on trial, so we can say whatever we want about it. So let's make this an example so that the Scientologists who are paying money to the church, who are supporting the church, who I need them to back me. So let's get them to believe that the system is corrupt, and therefore, when it's my turn around, they're still going to support me.
Oh, yeah.
I personally think that's what the game is they're playing.
Well, and I think it's a fairly easy game for him to win because you're inundated with anti-government, anti-FBI sentiments in all of L. Ron Hubbard's writings. It's consistent. That's one thing that he's stuck with, is the psychiatry and FBI and all these organizations are bad, and they're out there to stop people from doing well.
Didn't you find a quote in one of those books that you showed me beforehand? I don't know if you want to share it or not, about psychiatry not being bad or something. I can't remember what it was.
Okay, so I'm not going to read it out right now because I have to find it. But so I have the books. These are fairly rare, I believe. They're the original LRH executive directives, and these are what L. Ron Hubbard wrote to basically run the organizations. And there's one where he was talking about it's not necessarily the individual psychiatrists or psychologists that are bad. It's the industry as a whole, the people who run it. So, for example, that would be the World Health Organization, anything connected with that. Those are the real bad guys. So there was a program that was written by LRH to connect with more local psychologists and stuff, and try and kind of befriend them and make it so they're on Scientology side. I don't know how far it went, but I just happened to come across that in there. And there's even a form letter to inform the psychologist of what's going on and so forth. It's just all propaganda, but
they love a good conspiracy theory, and anything that they can use to prove why Scientology is being attacked, they will use it. I remember I got kicked out of Scientology twice. The first time I left staff, they sat me in a room and they said, look, Alex, this is why you can't leave staff. This is why Scientology is so important. And they sat me in front of a TV in the office of the Director of Special Affairs, Mark Pinchin. Mark, if you're watching, hello, I hope you're well. Send us a message. Haven't heard from you for a while. Hope you're okay. He sat me down and said, look, watch this. And he played this video called Loose Change, which is a documentary you can watch on YouTube. It's about 9/11. It's one of the big conspiracy theory videos about how it's all linked into this new world order and the government are behind everything and blah, blah, blah. Without getting into commentary on the conspiracy theory itself, the whole point is that there's this underground movement of governments working together and blah, blah, blah. And they came in and said, do you understand now why Scientology is so important? And I was like, no, I don't get it. There was nothing about Scientology in that video. It's about 9/11 and these underground conspiracy theories. Okay, Alex, these people are working together because they want the world to go in this direction. Scientology is the only thing that is trying to take the world in the other direction. So that is why we're getting so much bad press. That is why people are talking about Scientology in a bad way, because these big government agencies are working underground to try and suppress Scientology because they know that it works and they're scared. And that's the point where I thought this group is wackadoodle, because they're saying the reason they get bad press is because there's this underground government movement trying to suppress. No, it's wackadoodle. They get bad press because they do bad things. But Scientologists genuinely believe that the government is working against them.
Well, on that note, this is Ron's Journal 67. This is from 1983, just shortly before he passed away. I believe it was 83. But he goes over the 10 men who rule the world. Like, this is super duper conspiracy tinfoil hat type stuff going on in this cassette. And that is what was taught to me as a kid, is that it's all controlled. There's literally 10 men. All media is controlled by one, massive coordinated effort. And ultimately it comes down to psychiatry. The thing with, and I won't get too technical on this, but the thing with suppressive people that a lot of people don't understand, it's not just someone who doesn't like Scientology. It's someone who's so stuck in some sort of an incident way back on their whole track. So back millions of lives maybe. And they're actually seeing what's happening in real time right now as that incident. And these are like the true suppressive people. And so the reason that they fight everything that's quote unquote good is because they see these people. And LRH equated them to like Martians or FBI agents. So someone who's trying to get them. And if you really get down to the nitty gritty of it, it seems like L. Ron Hubbard himself this is how he was thinking, right? Like that he was fighting something, his mental illness, whatever it was, but he would force this on the congregation. And that's where all this conspiracy theory stuff comes from.
Yeah. And this is the thing, the belief about a suppressive person is that they get in the way, they want to stop you succeeding in life, and will do everything within their power to try and prevent you from doing well in life. And this is part of the picture I want to paint with my channel and with SPTV. Is like, this community is so welcoming and open and helpful, right? We all want to help each other, and I don't have a problem. If you came up to me and said, I want to believe in Scientology, fine, be my guest. You can believe in whatever you want. I do not have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is the effects that belief has on someone, right? For example, you could believe that killing someone is a good thing to do. Great, be my guest, believe what you want. But if you act on that, then that's a bad thing. And that's the thing with Scientology. And that's where I'm at, is trying to prove to these Scientologists that, look, I'm a suppressive person, and therefore all I want to do is stop people succeeding in life. No, I will do anything and everything in my power to help someone that needs help, and launch channels on YouTube and give them marketing advice, and welcome them to this community. If someone came up to me and said, hey Alex, you've helped me start a channel, I've been speaking out about Scientology, and you know what, I've thought about it and I want to rejoin the church, okay, fine. Like, that's completely okay for you to decide to do that. I'm not going to get in the way. We are helping each other, and that's what SPs are actually doing. Whereas what they're trying to make you believe as a Scientologist is the complete opposite,
Oh yeah. Like when you're in Scientology, and I think that if there are any Scientologists watching, they know that all SPs are just bad people at everything. They like you're taught, they only support negative things. They rally against good things. I mean, anything, right? It's so black and white. And so far, I've only met a few people in SPTV, but so far everyone's been very supportive, and certainly not a suppressive person, as has been told. I mean, you're amazing and supportive, and you reached out when I was away dealing with the death of my mom, just to see if I needed help. And a suppressive person wouldn't do that. So
no. Exactly. And talking of other creators, I think that's actually a good segue to jump into some Q&A if you're up to, because up to it, talking about other creators, Goldie here was replying to a comment. Aaron is well acquainted with Jeff, been a long time. He is aware. I'm sure he'll have him on soon. Do you have any info on that? Have you been speaking to Aaron? Are you going to appear on his channel? That would be great.
He definitely wants to do a live. I think he's just really busy with everything that's been going on. So I think, though, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if y'all want to just send him messages, let's get this guy on. I'm pretty free. So whenever he's available, he just has to let me know.
You know what would be great? If we could get you to 1,000 subscribers before you jump on Aaron's channel. I think
Sure.
that's a really good place to be at to then see the effect. Because when I first appeared on Aaron's channel, I got like 1,000 subscribers overnight. It was mad.
Yeah.
And this has been really interesting to see how that's affected your channel. And so, guys, if you're watching and you've just joined us or you joined us late, go and subscribe to Jeff's channel and give him a watch and a subscribe. He is new to SBTV and he's got some great stories. There's the link. Yeah, let's get you on Aaron's channel.
Please.
I'm down for sure. Poor mum or poor mom, 2 gingers. There we go. That's us. Cassie, Isaac, hello, welcome back. Alex is such a good. Well, thank you. I didn't realize that's what it said before I pulled it up, and now I'm embarrassed. Marilyn, Marilyn's awesome. We love her. Many are called, few are chosen. Was stolen from the Bible. You know, so true. Did you get? I remember getting flyers in the post with like pictures of people in Sea Org uniform with that same quote going, "Join the Sea Org."
Yeah, with swords.
Yeah,
yeah, it's so amazing.
I used to think of this though, right? As a teenager, I was like, that's so cool. Look at them with like their uniform and they're like doing stuff. They're cool. I'm like, I want to be a part of that, like this Space Navy thing, like game on. Like it was cool as a teenager.
Yeah.
But what they neglect to say in these leaflets is, yeah, you can join the Space Navy and wear a cool uniform, but you know, you won't get more than 4 hours of sleep and you won't get more than $50 a week and you get no retirement pension and no like, you know, all of the reality of what that's about.
And speaking of pay, sorry, just popped in my head. I found another LRH ED that actually said that staff need to be paid.
Yeah.
And it was something like 30% of the corrected gross income and so forth. And that doesn't happen.
Yeah, true. And if you can find a policy that says something, you could find another policy that says the opposite. True. And that's how they get around it. Joni Cummings are my 2 favorite gingers.
Thank you, Joni.
Very cute. I love that. Apart from LRH, LRH was ginger. Is he not one of your faves?
Oh, rude. Aaron's got some red hair in them too.
He does. He has a bit of. I feel. Look, I'm losing my hair very quickly, and I've decided when I lose my hair, I'm going to grow my beard out, and I will look like Aaron 2.0. Goldie's so British. Do fuck off.
Do fuck off.
Do fuck off. Yes. Lara FM answered the question earlier. She said, "Yes, I'm born Hollywood, Los Angeles, CA, but my whole family is from Toronto."
There you go.
There we go. Sweet Liberty question: is fair gaming as nasty in England and Canada as it is in US? Jeff, do you want to tell us about your fair game experience?
Oh yeah, I mean, I personally haven't been fair gamed yet. Although I did see a van on the street. I'm very aware of what vans park on my street, so I'm going to keep an eye out for that one. But yeah, I mean, SPs, people who are protesting Scientology in Vancouver, at the very least, is all I can speak to, are definitely followed. In the case with this guy named Phil, he actually was coming up with a different persona and it was Phil and a different last name. And he's trying to befriend Jerry Armstrong and infiltrate his life. And of course, Jerry is used to this kind of thing. And I think he figured it out fairly quickly, but this stuff happens, like it's really difficult because once you start speaking out, you now just can't trust anybody. There are cases where people have been friends for over a decade and it turns out they're Scientology operatives.
Yeah.
They just don't have any shame at all because it's in the name of the greatest good. So it's not it's not a bad thing. And that's how they justify. That's how I justified. You can do anything if it's for the greater good.
I think that's the message I want to get across. What I mentioned earlier about Scientology playing the long game. People hear about OSA and, private investigators and harassment and all of that is very clear. And if you're being fair gamed, people assume that it's very obvious because you got people following you and so on. But fair game goes much deeper than that. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize is fair game yes, there's the overt stuff of harassment, but actually, no, fair game is they might find a friend of yours from years and years ago that you haven't spoken to for a while, and they might buddy up with them, and they might try and suggest you get back in touch with you, and you reach out and they go, oh, great, yeah, good to hear from you. And this person probably doesn't even know that it's Scientology, and then they just keep leaking and feeding information from you. And you don't even realize, they probably don't even realize, it's all about getting that information that they can from this person. And this is how OSA operate, is very under the radar. They're very smart in the way they do it. Prime example, in the last week, I had a friend of mine message me and go, hey Alex, do you know this person? And I was like, nope, no idea who that is whatsoever. And they said, oh, because this person has contacted me saying, oh, hey, I'm working with Alex on the Scientology business website, and I'm just trying to get some more information about this, and this. And thankfully, this friend contacted me and asked me first before giving any information. But that's how OSA operate, is they message random people in my network and say, hey, I'm helping Alex on this project, and they're just trying to gather information. It wasn't like, hey, can you give me names and numbers of this, and this? It was like, what do you know about this situation or this person or this whatever? Little bits of information. That's how they operate. And I put out a tweet the other day of going, this is how OSA are operating. There is someone going around saying they're working with me and asking for a name or a whatever, and it might be something really small and insignificant, but they've done it to 100 people and it all builds up into a picture. So that's how they operate. It's the harassment, yes, but very under the radar.
Yeah, they're not stupid.
Yeah,
they're definitely not stupid. So when people joke hi OSA and all that stuff, it is funny to say hi to OSA, but they're out there and they're doing some pretty dirty stuff with no shame. So
absolutely. Goldie says it perfectly here. I feel the cracks in the dam. I think it's only a matter of time. Jeff, if you had to put a time on it, how long do you think we've got before the Church of Scientology is no more?
That's a tough one because they are so good at dragging stuff out. So I don't think that Scientology will ever go away. I could see people. I think the biggest attack that can be done on them is two things. So it's going to be tax exempt status for the United States, because really there aren't that many countries where it has the status. It's far fewer than they want you to believe. And then obviously lawsuits. So they always want money. And so that's what you have to go after. That's what's going to bring them down, is attacking their financial reserves and so forth by lawsuits. The problem, however, is going to be, people sign all these contracts that say arbitration. And so until that one stipulation is overruled by a judge effectively, where someone can actually sue someone versus going to what they call arbitration, which does not exist. It's a committee of evidence and it's a kangaroo court. Like, it's completely stacked against anybody who goes into a committee of evidence. Until that happens, I don't think anything truly going to happen.
You got to remember as well, like, even if for tomorrow the IRS were to come down and say Scientology tax exempt status is revoked and that's it, they would protest it and appeal it and go on, and it would be years and years and years. This happened. They lost their tax exempt status in the 60s, and they paid no tax from the 60s until 1993 because they were protesting and appealing for 30 years. And the reason the 1993 thing was so important was because if they didn't get tax exempt status, the unpaid tax bill was so much it would bankrupt the church, so they had to get it. The same thing would happen if they were to lose tax exemption tomorrow. They would appeal it and fight it for as long as possible, and they've got millions and millions and millions of dollars there to spend. Think about their real estate. The very last resort for Scientology would be selling their buildings. They would never do it in a million years. But say they've spent all of their money, they've got nothing left, they have to, right? There's probably $1 billion in property alone, right? In their flag building, in the London org, they've got buildings in Manchester, Sunderland, and Poole that they bought 16 years ago for $20 million or something, and they've just sat there empty, ready for refurbishment. That's money they don't want to, but they will fall back on if they have to. They can keep going for a very long time.
Well, and that's just the stuff that is publicly known about, right? There's so many properties that they own that aren't even Scientology related necessarily, just front groups. But I think the downfall of Scientology, plain and simple, is going to be once nobody is a Scientologist.
Yeah.
Because then there's no point. So the more people that are speaking out, the more you're sharing and liking and getting this stuff on YouTube, because YouTube is the new medium. You know, who cares about mainstream media anymore? This is where it's at. This is the larger channels.
Yeah.
So the more people that are doing this, the better.
Exactly. And look, Tiny Chaos says here, you guys are so brave to do what you're doing for real. I think it's so true. Anyone that speaks out about their experience in Scientology is so brave, and we can only do this together. You know, without each other, we wouldn't be able to carry on doing this and helping people out, right?
Exactly. And we're just a bunch of good friends
trying to help each other. Exactly. Now, look, Jeff, is there anything you want to say before I have one final message before we go?
Just want to thank everyone for listening to us ramble on and on about stuff that maybe you don't have experience with, but are interested in. So I like telling my stories, and I love hanging out with you, Alex.
Absolutely. And likewise, look, if you're watching this on my channel, go and show Jeff some love. Go and give him a subscribe. If you want to support the channel, we both have coffees. So you can buy us a coffee with the link in the description. But the best way of supporting is like, share, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. And before we go, I have one final message for everyone to leave us on tonight. This is me and John Sweeney.
Alex and I have a simple message to the Church of Scientology that goes like this. Church of Scientology, do fuck off. Alex